What if I told you the moment Harry and Meghan realized they were banned didn't come from a dramatic palace announcement, a formal letter, or even a polite heads-up from royal staff, but through a leaked message that spread across London's entertainment circles long before it reached Montecito? What if the humiliation didn't start with a headline, but with silence? A silence so calculated, so icy, so brutally intentional that even their own team didn't know how to spin it? Because that's exactly where this story begins. Not with the invitation William and Kate received, but with the absence of one. An empty space on a list. A void that screamed louder than any written rejection ever could. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Picture it. A crisp morning in Montecito. Not dramatic, not chaotic, just still. Harry in one part of the house, Meghan in another. Staff going about their routines. And then suddenly, everything shifts, because an assistant's phone buzzes, and a message appears from a contact embedded deep inside the UK entertainment industry. A message so quietly devastating that for a few seconds, nobody even knows how to react. They reread it. Again, hoping it changes. Hoping it's a misunderstanding. Hoping someone, somewhere, mistyped something. But no, the words stay the same. The royal variety performance at London's Royal Albert Hall, the glittering annual event that once embraced Meghan with applause, cameras, and carefully choreographed PR dreams, had finalized its royal guest list. And Harry and Meghan's names were not on it. Not tentatively excluded. Not pending confirmation. Not awaiting security clearance. Just not there. But William and Kate's names? Front and center. Highlighted even. Listed with their full titles. Chosen. Confirmed. Expected. Celebrated. Invited. That's the moment the shock hits the Montecito house like a cold wave. Because it isn't simply about a performance. It isn't about who sits where or who claps at what. It's about symbolism, power, visibility, status. Royal variety isn't just a show, it's an institution. A mirror reflecting the monarchy's internal hierarchy onto the world stage. And this year, the reflection is painfully clear. The Prince and Princess of Wales are in. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex are out. So the question becomes immediate, heavy, impossible to ignore. Why? Why now? Why this event? Why was this the breaking point? And was it truly about logistics and optics? Or was something deeper at play? Something that had been building quietly behind the scenes for months, even years, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal itself? Let's be honest. This isn't the first time turmoil has swirled between the Sussexes and the royal family. But this moment feels different. Sharper. More strategic. More personal. And as the messages circulate, as staff members start whispering, as Meghan's expression shifts from disbelief to tension to that familiar posture of controlled composure, it becomes obvious that this was not an oversight. No one forgot to include them. No one misplaced their names. This was intentional. A choice. A decision. But what triggered it? Was it their public statements about the royal family? Was it the ongoing tension between the brothers? Was it Meghan's Netflix presence, the podcasts, the memoir, the docuseries? Was it the press storms? The unpredictability? The fear that their attendance might overshadow the event itself? Or was it simpler? Colder? More symbolic? Was this exclusion quietly orchestrated to send a message, not to the public, but to Harry and Meghan themselves? Before we dive into what that message truly was, let's step back for a moment. Because royal variety isn't just another night of entertainment. It's one of the monarchy's most cherished, most carefully curated, most globally visible traditions. Generations of royals have attended. Everything about it. The seating, the red carpet, the cameras, the comedic sketches that gently poke at the royal guest of honor. Signals who stands where in the winds of public perception. Every appearance tells a story, even when nobody says a word. In fact, silence often speaks the loudest. So when the spotlight shifts away from Harry and Meghan, when the cameras turn toward William and Kate instead, it creates a narrative that no headline has to spell out. A narrative that says, this is the couple representing the crown. This is the couple carrying the mantle. This is the couple being publicly affirmed, publicly trusted, publicly elevated. Is it any wonder that Meghan reportedly felt blindsided, embarrassed, frustrated, furious? Imagine spending years trying to craft your own narrative. Imagine believing your rebranding efforts were finally working. Imagine thinking the doors of high-profile events were still open to you, only to discover that they've quietly been closed, locked, and sealed off without a single explanation. But the humiliation doesn't end there. Because even as Harry tries to decompress, trying to rationalize what happened, trying to calm Meghan down, trying to understand how the decision was made, another detail emerges. And this detail is the one that twists the knife. William and Kate didn't just get invited, they were requested. Specifically requested. By name. By the committee. By the organizers. By the performers themselves. Because, as one insider puts it, they represent stability, reliability, royal dignity. And that, not the ban itself, is the part Meghan reportedly couldn't stomach. Because what does that imply about her? Her image? Her reputation? Her presence at an event that once welcomed her with open arms? Does it mean the organizers saw her as unpredictable, too controversial, too distracting, or simply no longer worth the risk? But here's the twist. The committee didn't announce any of this publicly. They didn't release a statement. They didn't explain their decision. They didn't have to, because the message had already reached the only people who truly needed to hear it. And the message was clear. This year, the Sussexes are not part of the royal story the UK wants to tell. And that's when the emotional clash begins to unfold. Harry reportedly feels the sting of rejection, but also a deeper, more personal discomfort. It forces him to face an awkward question he's been dodging for months. Has he lost more than he realized? Has the royal world moved on without him? Has William quietly stepped into the leadership role he once assumed he'd share? Meanwhile, Meghan's internal conflict hits differently. She sees patterns, motives, strategies. She sees intent where Harry sees misfortune. She sees a deliberate effort to sideline her. And whether she's right or wrong, that belief ignites a firestorm behind closed doors. A flurry of messages. A rushed internal meeting. Staff asking the question everyone is thinking but too scared to articulate. Is this the beginning of a wider push to exclude them from future royal-adjacent events? Because if royal variety is off-limits, what's next? Trooping the color? Remembrance ceremonies? Major state events? Crown-related charity galas? And even if the Sussexes don't want to attend those events, even if they've carved out their own path, their own brand, their own world, does the monarchy's quiet distancing still sting? Does the shadow of exclusion still threaten their public image? Does it undermine the perception of influence they've been trying so tirelessly to build? Let's ask the audience. Would you want to be publicly excluded from something you once participated in proudly? Would you shrug it off? Or would it bother you more than you'd want to admit? These aren't simple questions. And for Harry and Meghan, the answers are even more complicated. Because every invitation carries a message. Every exclusion carries another. And this one, this quiet, deliberate, strategic omission, carries more weight than any public feud ever could. But here's the real problem. The ban doesn't happen in a vacuum. It doesn't appear out of nowhere. It doesn't stem from a single incident. It's the result of months, maybe years, of shifting dynamics within the monarchy, within the entertainment industry, within the global perception of royalty itself. And the decision to invite William and Kate instead? That's not just preference. That's symbolism. A message wrapped in etiquette. A move that speaks to the future of the monarchy more loudly than any speech or interview. And as the news spreads, as the whispers evolve into discussion threads, as the online commentary begins to grow louder and more chaotic, Meghan reportedly asks the question that everyone else is too afraid to ask. Is this a one-time decision? Or the beginning of a pattern that could ultimately shut them out of the royal ecosystem entirely? Because if the door to royal variety is closing, what if other doors are quietly closing too? What if their connection to the monarchy is fading faster than the public realizes? What if William and Kate's rise is happening simultaneously with their own slow cultural decline? And more importantly, who orchestrated this shift behind the scenes? That, right there, is where our story truly begins. Because once you understand who made the final call, and why, they were banned from royal variety this year, everything you thought you knew about the royal feud changes. What if the moment Harry and Meghan's world tilted didn't happen in front of cameras, microphones, or even in the middle of some high-profile event, but in a quiet Montecito evening that started out so routine, so painfully ordinary, no one in the house could have guessed how quickly everything would collapse into shock, frenzy, and panic. What if the moment that changed everything wasn't the ban itself, but the way they discovered it? Because make no mistake, being banned hurts. But being the last to know you've been banned, that's the kind of humiliation that burns deeper, sharper, and far more personal. It was late. Not too late. Not dramatic storm at midnight late. Just late enough for the world outside to be dark, but early enough that the house still hummed with soft lights, muted conversations, and the kind of evening rhythm that only exists in expensive homes where staff carry most of the weight. Harry was in the kitchen, restless as always, wandering between the fridge and the counter without really wanting anything. Meghan was finishing what she liked to call light reading, a stack of papers that somehow always involved branding opportunities, foundation partnerships, press strategy, or the next phase of whatever project she was carefully constructing. The children were asleep. The house was peaceful, calm, predictable. And then the message came. Not through the official channel, not through palace representatives, not through a manager or a publicist prepared to cushion the blow, not through anyone who had the training to soften the edges or dilute the impact. It arrived through a friend, a contact, a person whose name rarely appeared in any public conversation, but whose connections ran deep through UK entertainment circles. Someone who shouldn't even have known the guest list yet, let alone be texting Montecito about it. The assistant saw it first. Her phone buzzed on the counter, screen lighting up in the darkened hallway. For a moment she ignored it, assuming it was one of the usual late-night reminders or overseas scheduling questions. But then it buzzed again, and again, 3 rapid messages in a row. Urgent, marked with the kind of panic only insiders use when they know they're delivering information that will change the mood instantly. She picked it up. She read it once, then twice, then a third time, and every time, the line stayed the same. No invitation, no placeholder, no pending confirmation, nothing. Just a statement, brutally simple, from someone who had never sugar-coated anything. The Royal Variety Performance guest list is locked. William and Kate are attending. Harry and Meghan aren't. Committee decision. Not negotiable. That was it. No explanation. No justification. No diplomatic phrasing. Just facts, delivered with the cold efficiency of someone who did not have the time or the desire to wrap it in politeness. The assistant froze, breath catching in her throat, because she understood instantly what this meant, what it implied, what kind of storm it would unleash. She didn't move, didn't speak, didn't know whether she should tell them immediately or wait until morning. But she didn't have to decide, because Meghan walked into the room. Not rushed, not suspicious, just casually entering, the way one does when they expect nothing out of the ordinary. She glanced at the assistant. A moment of eye contact, nothing more, and that's when she noticed the expression. Tension, shock, fear, and Meghan, being Meghan, recognized it instantly. What happened, she asked. Not loudly, not dramatically, just sharply enough to cut the air in half. The assistant hesitated. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, long enough for Meghan's eyes to narrow, long enough for Harry to call out from the kitchen, sensing the shift, long enough for the atmosphere in the room to thicken with that uncanny sense that something was about to go terribly wrong. When the assistant finally spoke, her voice trembled. It's about royal variety. Just like that, the temperature in the room dropped. Now here's the thing. Meghan is not someone who reacts without calculation. Her first instinct is control. Control of expression, control of breathing, control of perception. But even she couldn't hide the sudden tightening around her eyes. Because the Royal Variety Performance wasn't just another event. It wasn't optional. It wasn't trivial. It wasn't something she could dismiss as beneath her interest. This was a major cultural moment. A moment steeped in tradition, prestige, and international visibility. A moment the royal family uses to shape public sentiment. A moment that, for the first time, she was being openly excluded from. What about it? Meghan asked, voice controlled but taut, as though bracing for impact. The assistant swallowed. There's no invitation. You're not on the list. The words slammed into the room with the force of a dropped weight. Meghan didn't blink at first, didn't breathe, didn't move. She absorbed it, letting the meaning sink in layer by layer. Excluded, overlooked, left out. But then came the words that mattered even more, words that upended the atmosphere entirely. William and Kate were invited. Now it felt like a physical blow. Harry walked into the room just in time to hear that part. His expression twisted, not into anger, not yet, but into confusion. Pure confusion. Because in his mind, invitations might fluctuate, schedules might clash, diplomatic subtleties might exist, but being replaced? Being publicly excluded? That was something he hadn't fully prepared himself for. Wait, he said, raising a hand toward the assistant. What do you mean invited? As in actually invited? Confirmed. Yes, she whispered. Specifically requested. Silence again. Heavier this time. Heavier than the first. The kind that suffocates. And this is where the emotional contradictions start to surface. Harry's instinct is personal, emotional, rooted in memory, history, and deeply buried wounds. He sees the decision as another chapter in the ongoing estrangement from his family, another sign that the gap between him and William is widening beyond repair. Meghan's instinct, however, is strategic, calculated, analytical. She doesn't just see the exclusion, she sees the optics, the message, the timing, the narrative implications. She sees the way media will interpret this. She sees the way Kensington Palace might be positioning itself. She sees a targeted slight, not a logistical decision. Ask yourself, who would you be in that moment? Would you feel wounded, embarrassed, angry, confused? All at once. Because that's what was happening in that room. Three human reactions unfolding in three completely different ways, all pointing to the same uncomfortable truth. Something bigger was happening behind the scenes, and they had no idea where it began or where it was heading. Harry paced. Meghan sat down, stiff and deliberate. The assistant hovered, unsure if she should stay or leave. And slowly, the numbness melted away and the questions began to form. Why weren't they invited? Was it a political decision? A PR decision? A royal directive? A committee request? Or worse, was it a collective decision shared by all of them? Meghan's voice cut through the silence. Calm. Too calm. Did they explain why? No, the assistant replied. But they confirmed it wasn't an oversight. Meghan exhaled sharply, a sound somewhere between disbelief and exhaustion. So it's deliberate, she said. Not a question, a conclusion. Harry stopped pacing. Who told you? He asked, needing to know whether the information was reliable, verifiable, solid. The assistant gave the name. Harry knew the contact. Meghan knew the contact. Someone trustworthy. Someone with access. Someone who wouldn't risk fabricating a story this sensitive. Which meant the information wasn't just accurate, it was final. Do you see the layers here? Do you feel the shift? Do you sense the unraveling? Because this wasn't merely about an event. This was about perception, about power, about being sidelined, about being replaced with a couple the monarchy sees as safe, predictable, stable, and aligned. That word, aligned, echoed in Meghan's mind like a warning bell. Aligned with what? With the institution? With public sentiment? With long-term royal strategy? And more importantly, did this mean she and Harry were no longer aligned with any of it? Harry broke the silence again, voice unsteady but trying to remain composed. Maybe it's a misunderstanding. Maybe we need to call someone. Check. Confirm. But Meghan knew better. She knew the entertainment world. She understood committees, boards, publicists, networks, production companies, and the million invisible hands that shape major events. When a decision is finalized, it's finalized. There is no casual mistake. Not on guest lists of this scale. Not at events this prestigious. Not when so many eyes are watching. Still, Harry needed to hear it from someone else. Needed to understand how deeply the decision ran. Needed to confirm whether the exclusion was political, personal, or something worse, inevitable. And that's when another message came in. A second confirmation. From a different source. With one devastating line. They wanted the Waleses, not the Sussexes. That was the moment the emotional energy in the room snapped like a fragile thread stretched too tightly. Meghan inhaled sharply. Harry froze. The assistant covered her mouth. Because the cruelty wasn't just in the decision, but in the wording. The Waleses were wanted, desired, requested, welcomed. The Sussexes were not. This wasn't scheduling. This wasn't logistics. This wasn't security. This was preference. And not for them. Harry's voice was hoarse when he spoke again. So what now? Meghan looked up slowly, eyes hardening with a faint, icy clarity. We find out why, she said. Because decisions like this don't happen in isolation. She was right. And what they didn't know yet, what no one in the Montecito house realized, is that the reason they were banned wasn't just about them. It had everything to do with a decision made months earlier by someone they didn't expect. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Have you ever wondered why one single event, just one evening, one stage, one red carpet, can strike harder than 100 tabloid headlines? Why a single invitation can carry more political weight than a full press conference? Why something that, on the surface, looks like glitter, comedy sketches, and musical performances can hit the Sussexes like a personal betrayal? Because royal variety isn't just a show. It's not just entertainment. It's not even just a royal duty. It is a message, a coded, prestigious, historically loaded message, and every royal who steps onto that stage understands exactly what it means. So before we dig deeper into the machinery that excluded Harry and Meghan, we have to understand the value of what they lost. We have to break down the symbolism, the expectations, the silent calculations made by the committee, the palace, the performers, the networks, and the nation. Because this wasn't just a ban. It was a statement. And statements made through tradition can be sharper than knives. Let's start with the obvious question. What makes the royal variety performance so important? Most people think they know. They think it's just a televised fundraising event. Fun, charming, harmless. A show where the royals sit in a velvet-covered box while comedians make gentle jokes and singers belt out impressive notes. A night of laughter and charity. That's the surface, the visible layer, the polished narrative. But underneath, it's a battlefield of perception, a chessboard of royal positioning, a spotlight that does more than illuminate, it defines. Because for over a century, this performance has been the monarchy's way of stepping into the world of entertainment not as spectators, but as symbols. It's where the future king or queen is showcased to the nation. It's where the public sees who truly represents the crown at that moment in time. It's where the institution quietly announces, "This is the face we trust. This is the couple we present to the world. This is who embodies royal stability, dignity, and continuity." Now imagine being excluded from that stage. Imagine knowing that the spotlight has shifted without warning. Imagine understanding that your absence isn't accidental, it's intentional. Imagine realizing the monarchy didn't want your presence associated with the crown on one of the few nights when the royal image is broadcast internationally in full ceremonial glory. That's why Meghan's heart dropped. That's why Harry's pacing grew frantic. That's why their team whispered in corners, trying to understand the implications. Because they knew the truth. This wasn't a scheduling issue. This wasn't a preference. It wasn't even about personal conflict. It was about optics. Optics they no longer controlled. Let me ask you something. If your ex-family, who holds all the cards in terms of symbolism, tradition, and national representation, decides that you are no longer part of their public narrative, wouldn't that shake you? Wouldn't that make you question your own relevance? Wouldn't that sting in a way words can't soften? Exactly. Now let's peel back the layers. Royal variety is carefully curated by networks, producers, entertainment directors, and of course, the royal household. Every aspect is bitingly strategic. From the moment the event begins, cameras zoom in on the royal guests, sometimes even before the performers. Because those faces, signal the monarchy's current direction. When William and Kate attend, the message is clear. These are the future. These are the heirs. These are the figures the institution stands behind. When Charles attended every year as Prince of Wales, that message reverberated just as loudly. He is next. He is steady. He is ready. So think about it. What does it say when Harry and Meghan are suddenly not only left off the list, but quietly blocked from even being considered? What does it say when the committee decides the spotlight should fall solely on William and Kate? What does it say when the monarchy does nothing, absolutely nothing, to counter or soften the decision? It says everything. But let's go deeper, because here's the twist. The impact of royal variety isn't just internal. It's global. Overseas networks broadcast it. International publications cover it. Millions watch the royal reactions, the comedic skits, the close-up camera pans capturing subtle micro-expressions. Every gesture becomes a meme, a headline, a moment of cultural commentary. And this matters now more than ever, because the royal family is in a fragile transition. King Charles is establishing his reign. William is positioning himself as the steady future. Kate is solidifying her role as the elegant, reliable modern princess. And the institution absolutely cannot afford chaos. Not now. Not during a transitional era. Not when public trust is still recalibrating. So ask yourself, could the Sussexes bring stability to an event like this? Or would their presence, given all the interviews, the documentaries, the controversies, the lawsuits, the tensions, the unpredictable PR storms, represent risk? This is where the entertainment perspective kicks in. Because performers talk, producers talk, agents talk, and what the industry loathes, what they absolutely despise, is unpredictability. They want safety, smoothness, predictable headlines, events that run themselves. And here's the uncomfortable truth for Harry and Meghan. Within entertainment circles, their presence rarely guarantees predictability. Is that fair? Maybe not. Is it reality? Absolutely yes. Because even if they attend quietly, even if they smile, even if they follow protocol, even if they do nothing controversial, just being there invites scrutiny, invites paparazzi chaos, invites divided public opinion, invites heated online discourse that can overshadow the performers, the charity beneficiaries, and the event itself. And the Royal Variety Committee knows this. So does the palace. So do the networks. So while Harry may have taken the ban personally, and while Meghan may have seen it as an attack on her image, the decision didn't originate from emotion. It originated from strategy. Cold, calculated, PR strategy. But this is where the plot thickens. This is where things get interesting. This is where everything we think we understand about the ban starts to twist into something more complex. Because the committee didn't just want William and Kate. They needed them. Why? Because ratings have been declining. Because public confidence in the monarchy shifts from year to year. Because international broadcasting deals depend on compelling, safe, royal imagery. Because the show needs a stable future nucleus, faces the public trusts, recognizes, and emotionally connects with. And right now, globally, William and Kate carry that aura. Now ask yourself, how do Harry and Meghan fit into that narrative? Are they seen as core royals? Or as separate, detached, independent, controversial, brand first rather than crown first? That's the contradiction at the heart of this story. Harry and Meghan built their own brand to escape being controlled by the monarchy. But in doing so, they lost the institutional shelter that once guaranteed them these prestigious platforms. They wanted creative independence, but independence often comes with exclusion. Here's where the emotional spike hits. Because while Meghan was analyzing the optics, interpreting the motives, reading between the lines, Harry was thinking of something else entirely. Something far more painful. Memories. Of attending the performance with William. Of laughing during skits together. Of walking into the hall behind his father. Of feeling part of something larger, older, permanent. A family. A duty. A tradition. And now? Now he was being told, quietly, silently, politely, that he and Meghan did not belong in that tradition anymore. Imagine that moment. Imagine the emotional whiplash. Imagine the dawning realization. Not about the ban itself, but about everything it represented. This wasn't about one event. It was about a shift in status, a shift in trust, a shift in influence. And that shift wasn't happening today. It had been happening for a long time. They just hadn't noticed how far it had gone. But the biggest reason royal variety matters, the one Harry and Meghan didn't see coming, is this. It's a test. A test the monarchy uses to measure who the public embraces. A test the monarchy uses to signal who the future revolves around. A test the monarchy uses to position its key players on the world stage. William and Kate passed. Harry and Meghan weren't even considered. But here's the twist. Someone played a major role in influencing this decision. Someone the Sussexes didn't blame at first. Someone they thought was neutral. Someone who wasn't. And when Meghan discovers who it was, and why, they'll both realize the ban was not only intentional. It was personal. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What if I told you the royal variety ban didn't originate with the palace, the tabloids, the public, or even the Waleses, but from the committee itself? What if the decision that sent shockwaves through Montecito was actually months in the making, shaped by whispered conversations, uneasy memories, and the growing sense that the Sussexes posed a kind of risk that the royal variety performance simply couldn't afford? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Committees notice patterns, energy, unpredictability, and public temperature long before anyone else acknowledges them. They talk to producers. They talk to networks. They talk to security advisors, stage managers, publicists, performers, and all the silent gears that keep a massive televised event running. And over time, a quiet consensus began forming, one that had nothing to do with personal bias, but everything to do with protecting an event that has survived world wars, coronations, abdications, scandals, and the shifting tide of public taste. The Sussexes had become unpredictable, not hostile, not dangerous, just volatile in a way that made entertainment planners nervous. A kind of PR gravity that pulled all attention toward them, often away from the show itself. And in a year where pressure was rising, ratings were slipping, and the monarchy needed a stabilizing symbol more than ever, the committee wasn't willing to gamble. The first seeds of discomfort were planted years ago, before the ban, before the Netflix series, before the memoir. It started the last time Harry and Meghan attended Royal Variety. To the public, the night seemed flawless. Beautiful pictures, charming interactions, perfectly posed moments. But behind the curtain, the atmosphere wasn't as seamless as it looked. Security teams had been unusually strained. Photographers had pushed harder than normal. The backstage corridors felt chaotic. Comedians adjusted their jokes last minute to avoid triggering controversy. One performer reportedly admitted later that they felt pressure to avoid anything that could be construed as a jab, fearing online backlash from Sussex supporters. It wasn't the couple's fault. Not directly. It was the environment around them, frenzied, hypercharged, on edge, like the entire show was holding its breath waiting to see what headlines would erupt the next day. The committee remembered that feeling. And over the years, it grew heavier in their memory, especially as the Sussexes became media lightning rods on both sides of the Atlantic. Producers began noticing a pattern. Whenever Harry and Meghan appeared in public, the story became about them. Not the event, not the cause, not the performers, not the purpose. It was coverage they couldn't control, headlines they couldn't predict, social media storms that often overshadowed the charitable mission of the Royal Variety performance. And while entertainment thrives on attention, it hates losing control. That's the contradiction at the heart of this chapter. Fame attracts, but unpredictability repels. And when those two forces collide, the people in charge will always choose stability over spectacle. So imagine the committee sitting around a long polished table months before the event, reviewing guest lists, charity partners, artist lineups, broadcast contracts, logistical concerns, and then eventually arriving at the question of which royals to invite. This conversation isn't glamorous. It's not dramatic. It's practical. It's strategic. It's built on experience, patterns, and precedent. They consider security budgets, press interest, ticket sales, international syndication, and most importantly, they consider public sentiment. And so, almost quietly, without any dramatic declaration, a shift begins. A committee member mentions that Harry and Meghan's attendance might create unnecessary noise. Another points out that the show's focus risks being diluted. Another recalls how last time, the global coverage fixated more on Meghan's dress, posture, and body language than any of the performers who spent months preparing for the biggest night of their careers. Slowly, pieces of the puzzle align. No one says ban. No one says exclude. No one says anything so blunt. Instead, they phrase it politely. Given the current climate, perhaps the Waleses would be the more appropriate choice this year. That's the line. The sentence. The moment everything shifts. Not cruel. Not dramatic. Just strategic. A sentence cloaked in civility, but loaded with implications. And once it's spoken, others nod. Because William and Kate embody predictability. Calm. Order. An image the monarchy desperately needs. They don't spark media chaos. They don't invite polarized online wars. They don't trigger think pieces dissecting every blink, every outfit, every smile. They show up, perform the duty, smile, clap, and leave without generating a storm. For an event that already carries pressure, they're the safest choice possible. Now let's add another layer, because this chapter isn't only about committee strategy, it's also about industry pressure. Performers talk. Agents talk. Managers whisper concerns. Some quietly express discomfort about performing in a room where the audience's attention might shift entirely, depending on the couple in the royal box. Comedians feel they can't joke freely. Singers worry their performances will become background noise next to Twitter debates about Meghan's facial expressions. Producers worry about being accused of bias if a camera lingers too long or not long enough. Everything becomes loaded. Everything becomes risky. And in entertainment, when you mix risk with high stakes, decisions become cautious. So the committee draws the line, not with anger, not with personal bias, but with a fear that the show would lose its essence if the Sussexes attended. And the more they discuss it, the more reasonable the exclusion feels. By the end of the meeting, the decision is not only settled, it feels inevitable. But this is where the emotional complexity deepens, because the committee did not intend to hurt Harry and Meghan. They didn't think of the personal consequences, the humiliation, the optics, or the narrative implications. Their decision was driven entirely by operational concerns, concerns that Harry and Meghan would never accept as justification. Because from the Sussexes' perspective, the ban is not logistical. It's symbolic. Exclusion isn't logistical, it's emotional. It triggers feelings tied to their departure from the monarchy, tied to strained relationships, tied to the constant battle for narrative control. For Meghan, exclusion feels like rejection. For Harry, it feels like abandonment. For the committee, it felt like a necessary safeguard. Those perspectives could not be more different. And here's the twist the Sussexes never saw coming. The committee wasn't acting alone. They were listening to someone. Someone who had quietly advised them months earlier. Someone who understood optics better than anyone in the monarchy. Someone who had noticed the rising tension between the Sussexes and the institution and subtly encouraged the committee to choose stability over controversy. Someone whose guidance carried weight not because of authority, but because of influence. This advisor planted an idea long before the guest list was written. Not maliciously, not vindicatively, simply strategically. The entertainment world respects this person, respects their vision, respects their instincts, respects their ability to maintain the monarchy's dignity on the world stage. It was their voice, calm and understated, that helped shift the committee's thinking. And that person wasn't King Charles. It wasn't Camilla. It wasn't even a royal variety producer. It was someone far more surprising, far more strategic, far more connected to the direction of the modern monarchy. And when Meghan finds out who influenced the ban, her reaction will ignite a chain response that turns this simple committee decision into something far more personal, far more emotional, and far more explosive than anyone anticipated. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What if the royal variety ban wasn't the committee's idea at all? What if their decision, polite, diplomatic, seemingly harmless, came only after an invisible pressure campaign built slowly, subtly, methodically behind the scenes? What if the committee wasn't the architect, but the instrument? Because here's the truth very few people realize. In the world of royal events, influence rarely arrives through direct commands. It arrives through whispers, through guidance, through nudges disguised as suggestions, through conversations that seem casual but reshape entire decisions. And in this case, the pressure didn't come from the palace courtiers or the senior staff or even the king himself. It came from a set of voices within the entertainment world, voices that the Sussexes likely never suspected would shape their fate. It began with quiet inquiries, months before the guest list was public, months before anyone in Montecito had even thought about royal variety, months before the committee met. Certain performers, managers, and agents began expressing concerns, not loudly, not formally, not with complaints or threats, but quietly, privately, in conversations that were supposed to stay invisible. They weren't hostile toward Harry and Meghan. They weren't political. They weren't choosing sides. They were simply trying to protect their clients, their preparation, their night. You have to understand, performers train months for royal variety. Singers rehearse for hours. Comedians craft jokes specifically for the royal audience. Dancers push their bodies to the limit. For many, that stage is the pinnacle of their year, or their entire career. And the last time the Sussexes attended, something unexpected happened. The performers didn't get the spotlight. The royals did. It wasn't deliberate. It wasn't malicious. But it was reality. Media coverage focused on Meghan's dress, her expressions, her handshake, her conversation with performers backstage. Headlines fixated on her rather than the acts. Camera angles emphasized her reactions rather than the performer's talent. Social media amplified every frame of the royal box, while the artists who poured their souls into the stage watched their hard-earned moment become secondary. And that memory stayed with them, not as resentment toward Harry and Meghan specifically, but as a sense of unease, a sense that their craft could be overshadowed through no fault of their own. So this year, when agents began hearing rumors that the Sussexes might attend again, they quietly spoke up, not with ultimatums, but with gentle caution. Comments like, "Will the focus be on the performers this year?" Or, "We want to make sure the attention stays on the acts." Or, "We're hoping this year is less chaotic backstage." These weren't criticisms. They were fears. Fears that the buzz, chatter, paparazzi noise, and polarized online commentary that follows the Sussexes everywhere would once again hijack the event. Now imagine these subtle concerns making their way to producers, then to the people who shaped the broadcast narrative, then to the committee members planning the event's flow. You begin to see how influence works, not as a hammer, but as a whisper, not as force, but as atmosphere. And gradually, a collective unease begins to form. Will inviting Harry and Meghan compromise the show's purpose? Will the focus shift away from the performers? Will the media coverage become skewed again? Will this year's broadcast be drowned in royal drama instead of artistry? No one speaks of bans. No one mentions exclusion. Instead, they talk about protecting the event, ensuring smooth coverage, avoiding distractions, and prioritizing the performers. And those ideas begin to take shape in the minds of the committee members until they feel like their own thoughts. But the real pressure, the one that tipped the scales, came from someone unexpected. Someone inside the entertainment industry with a reputation for fairness, dignity, and quiet influence. Someone the committee genuinely respected. And no, it wasn't a producer or a royal aide or a palace press secretary. It was a performer, a veteran artist, a long-standing supporter of the Royal Variety charity, a beloved figure in the UK entertainment world whose word carries gravity not because of their title, but because of their history. This entertainer, who had performed at Royal Variety more times than most, asked a simple question during a private planning discussion. Is this year really the right moment for Harry and Meghan to attend? Not in anger, not in mockery, not in judgment. The tone was gentle, almost hesitant. But that question carried weight, and when they followed it up with, would it help the show stay focused if we invited the heirs instead? The committee members felt something inside them tilt. Because when someone who embodies the spirit of Royal Variety expresses hesitation, the committee listens. Performers trust this person. Production teams trust this person. Audiences adore this person. Their opinion matters, not because they dictate policy, but because they understand the delicate balance between entertainment and royal tradition better than anyone alive. So suddenly, the committee wasn't simply weighing preferences. They were weighing guidance from someone they respected deeply. They began imagining the night through a different lens. They pictured the cameras flashing wildly if Meghan entered the theater. They imagined paparazzi outside the Royal Albert Hall turning red carpet coverage into a battle scene. They imagined social media erupting into debates before the first act even began. They imagined the headlines the next day and how they might overshadow months of preparation by every artist performing. And then they imagined William and Kate. Predictable, polished, non-divisive. A couple the public recognizes as the future of the monarchy. A couple whose presence would elevate the event without overshadowing it. A couple who, this is important, fits seamlessly into the narrative the Royal Variety performance has upheld for decades. So as the committee weighed these contrasting visions, pressure mounted. Not hostile pressure, not manipulative pressure, just the natural pressure that comes when smart people know they need stability in an unstable moment. But the real twist arrives here. Even though Meghan and Harry had no idea, another powerful voice was shaping this direction from afar. Someone who wasn't a performer, wasn't a committee member, and wasn't a royal aide. Someone whose influence stretches across fields, across industries, across traditions. Someone with an eye for long-term strategy and an understanding of public sentiment deeper than any poll or headline. This person didn't tell the committee what to do. They didn't even speak to them directly. But they shaped the world in which the committee made its choice. Their moves, their reputation, their recent visibility, their growing influence in the monarchy. All of it contributed to a subtle but seismic shift that made William and Kate the obvious choice for this year's show. and Harry and Meghan the obvious omission. And that person, whose identity Meghan would eventually learn, was someone she did not expect. Someone she never imagined would be a factor in this particular decision. Someone whose rising power within the monarchy created ripple effects far beyond the palace walls. Because pressure doesn't always come in the form of requests. Sometimes it comes in the form of influence. And when Meghan discovers who indirectly shaped the environment that led to their exclusion, she will see the ban not just as a strategic move, but as a signal of a much bigger force overtaking her former royal world. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What if I told you William's role in this story wasn't loud, aggressive, or direct, but quiet, strategic, and far more influential than anyone outside the palace realizes? What if the Prince of Wales didn't need to make a single request, demand, or suggestion to shift the Royal Variety Committee's decision, yet still became the gravitational force that pulled the entire event toward him? Because William's power doesn't operate through confrontation. It operates through presence, through reputation, through the unspoken reality that the monarchy's future depends on him. And that, more than anything, shaped the committee's thinking long before the final guest list was drafted. You see, William didn't lobby for the invitation. He didn't ask for it. He didn't send subtle messages through aides or hint at attendance. He didn't have to. His very position, heir to the throne, stabilizing figure, global symbol of continuity, spoke louder than any statement ever could. And over the last 2 years, especially since the Queen's passing and Charles stepping into kingship, William has entered a new phase of influence. One where his presence brings reassurance to institutions that have existed longer than any living person. One where his attendance signals strength. One where his approval or involvement carries a weight Harry's no longer does. But that wasn't always the case. And that's what makes this chapter so emotionally layered. Because as the committee leaned toward inviting William and Kate, old memories resurfaced for Harry. Memories of a time when he and William were equals in the public eye. When their joint appearances felt like a united front. When they walked into events side by side, wearing the same uniforms, smiling at the same jokes, exchanging looks only brothers understand. When royal variety wasn't a symbol of division, but a symbol of shared duty. Those days are gone. And this moment, this invitation, was proof. Imagine being Harry, pacing in Montecito, realizing the committee didn't just choose William because he's the heir. They chose him because he represents stability in a time when the monarchy desperately needs it. Because the UK is adjusting to a new reign. Because the world is watching how Charles handles his responsibilities. Because the public increasingly looks to William and Kate as the steady, modern, relatable couple carrying the crown forward. Because the institution has shifted its weight onto William, and that shift leaves no room for competing narratives. And here's where things get more interesting. The committee didn't just see William as the safe choice. They saw him as the necessary choice. Someone who brings legitimacy, attention, grace. Someone whose attendance reassures international broadcasters and sponsors. Someone who reinforces tradition. Someone who elevates the event without overshadowing the performers, unlike the unpredictable frenzy that can surround Meghan. Is that fair? Maybe not. Is it true? Absolutely. Now let's dig into the part Meghan never anticipated. William wasn't passive in this story. His influence was invisible, but powerful. Not through manipulation, but through alignment. The committee looked at the year's context, political shifts, royal transitions, public sentiment, and saw William at the center of it. They saw him building stronger ties with charities, taking on more official duties, stepping into the role of steady, modern statesman with a clarity and poise the monarchy hasn't seen in years. He has become, whether the Sussexes like it or not, the face of the future. And institutions like Royal Variety adjust their decisions accordingly. Not because William asks them to, but because aligning with him ensures cultural relevance. Now think about the emotional blow this dealt to Harry. Because underneath all the interviews, the Netflix documentaries, the memoir chapters, the public statements, there is still a brother. A brother who once followed William into every royal role. A brother who once felt he had a place beside him. A brother who once knew he had value within the institution, even if he wasn't the heir. And now? Now he was realizing the institution had moved forward without him. That William wasn't just the older brother anymore. He was the royal gravitational center, the one everyone organizes around. And here's the twist. Meghan sensed William's invisible influence long before Harry did. Meghan understands hierarchy. She understands optics. She understands the politics of reputation better than anyone. And when she heard that William and Kate were invited, she didn't see coincidence. She saw strategy, intent, positioning. In her mind, the palace wasn't merely endorsing William. They were elevating him at the expense of Harry. Now, whether that's true or not is irrelevant. What matters is perception. And Meghan's perception is razor sharp. She immediately read into the invitation what many people overlooked. The royal variety performance didn't just choose William. It centered him. Why? Because William's attendance sends a global message. This is the monarchy's direction. This is the couple representing the crown. This is who we trust with tradition. This is who embodies the institution's values now. And whether the palace orchestrated it or not, that message was unavoidable. But the emotional shock didn't stop there. Imagine Meghan replaying every interview, every headline, every public appearance over the past 3 years, carrying the belief that she and Harry were still part of the cultural conversation around the monarchy. And then suddenly, in one night, with one decision, that illusion collapses. Because being excluded from an event like Royal Variety is not a minor slight, it's a declaration. A declaration that says, you are no longer the narrative we want associated with the crown. Now here's where we take a turn. Because William's role behind the scenes wasn't only passive influence. He played a more subtle, surprising part. One he never intended, but one that shaped everything. Throughout the year, William quietly strengthened his relationships with cultural institutions, charities, and traditional British pillars like the Royal Variety Charity. Not because he wanted to overshadow anyone, but because he understood something fundamental. The monarchy survives by staying connected to the fabric of national identity. And performing that role naturally increased his visibility, credibility, and authority within entertainment circles. He visited studios. He met with performers. He recorded messages for charities. He lent his support to mental health initiatives within the arts community. He made himself visible in exactly the circles that shape events like Royal Variety. And whether he knew it or not, every one of those moments sent the same signal. William is present. William is engaged. William is committed. William is the future. And here's the part that stung the Sussexes more than anything. This wasn't calculated against them. It wasn't personal. It wasn't designed to exclude them. It was simply William fulfilling the role he was born into. But power doesn't need intention to have impact. And in this case, William's growing influence created a ripple effect that pushed Harry and Meghan out, without him lifting a finger. And yet, there was one person close to William and Kate who did play an active role. Someone who shaped public perception. Someone who understands the media better than almost anyone in the royal orbit. Someone whose influence doesn't come from a title, but from strategy. This person didn't tell the committee what to do. They didn't need to. All they had to do was continue strengthening William and Kate's image at a moment when Harry and Meghan's was faltering. Their guidance indirectly created the conditions for the committee to choose the Waleses without hesitation. And Meghan, once she learns who it was, will realize the true sting of the ban isn't just exclusion. It's realizing the person who helped shape the environment that sidelined her wasn't an enemy or a rival. It was someone she underestimated, someone she never saw coming. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What if the true explosion in Montecito didn't happen when Harry learned they weren't invited, but when Meghan learned Kate was? Because the ban hurt, yes. The exclusion stung. The silence from the committee felt cold and calculated. But nothing, absolutely nothing, ignited the emotional firestorm more than hearing that the woman Meghan has always been quietly compared to, measured against, dissected alongside, was not only invited, but featured, requested, positioned as the radiant centerpiece of the night. And the moment that news hit the Montecito home, the entire atmosphere shifted from shock to something sharper, deeper, more visceral. It didn't matter how diplomatic the wording was. It didn't matter that the invitation was phrased gracefully, professionally, predictably. What Meghan saw, and what she immediately fixated on, was the optics, the contrast, the comparison. The instant media narrative that would ignite the second the Waleses stepped onto the Royal Albert Hall red carpet. Imagine it. Kate in a dazzling gown, the cameras sweeping across her face, the commentators praising her elegance, fashion analysts celebrating her choices, and the headlines the next morning reinforcing the same storyline Meghan has been fighting against since 2016, that Kate is adored, admired, embraced, and elevated, while she is scrutinized, critiqued, questioned, and now excluded. This wasn't just an invitation. It was confirmation of the social hierarchy. A hierarchy Meghan has always felt pressing against her, even when she tried to ignore it. Now picture this moment. Meghan is sitting on the edge of the sofa, posture stiff, breathing shallow, trying to maintain composure. The assistant finishes reading the message aloud. Harry looks confused, trying to process the sequence of events. And then it happens. The brief flash of emotion across Meghan's face, so quick that only someone who knows her intimately would catch it. A flicker of something raw, hurt, maybe anger, maybe even fear. Not fear of Kate herself, but fear of the narrative. Fear of being overshadowed. Fear of being replaced. Fear of being made irrelevant in the royal context she once belonged to. Because here's the truth Meghan will never admit publicly, but felt in that moment with brutal clarity. Kate attending alone would have been one thing. Kate attending beside William would have been expected. But Kate being specifically requested, trusted, and placed at the center of a major royal-adjacent event, while Meghan wasn't even considered, was the same as the monarchy holding up a mirror and saying, "This is the woman we align with. This is the woman we present to the world. This is the woman who represents royal continuity. And that woman is not you." Imagine hearing that indirectly, without a word being spoken. Imagine sensing that message without it ever being stated. Now let's talk about why Kate's presence triggered something deeper in Meghan. Kate has always been the institution's steady figure. Poised, measured, non-controversial, softly influential. She plays by the rules. She adapts to the expectations. She doesn't push against the system. And because she doesn't push, the system embraces her fully. These traits, order, compliance, grace, make her the perfect royal for traditional events. But they also make her Meghan's foil. Meghan is expressive, ambitious, outspoken, driven by purpose, and unafraid to push against boundaries. Those traits made her a fascinating figure to the media, but a complicated one for institutions that thrive on predictability. So when Meghan heard that Kate was invited, something more painful registered inside her. The realization that Kate wasn't merely the preferred royal. She was the endorsed royal, the highlighted royal, the symbolic royal who communicated stability simply by walking into a room. And Meghan knew that just by appearing at Royal Variety, Kate would be bathed in positive coverage, elevated further into the role of future queen, and used as the standard by which all royal women, including Meghan, would be measured. Ask yourself, how would you react if the person constantly compared to you, the person you are forever placed next to in headlines and discussions, suddenly received a golden spotlight you were denied? Would you smile and shrug it off? Or would you feel something twist inside your chest, a mix of frustration, envy, fear, and exhaustion? Because that's what happened. Harry, meanwhile, watched the tension rise in Meghan's body language. He saw the jaw tighten, the eyes narrow, the stillness settle over her. And he recognized the signs. These were the same cues that emerged during their most difficult royal experiences. Meghan wasn't just hurt. She was strategizing. She was recalibrating the narrative. She was thinking 10 steps ahead. Because that's what Meghan does when something threatens her public image. She prepares for the inevitable story. And the inevitable story was this. Kate shines at Royal Variety while Meghan sits in Montecito, silent, excluded, and unable to control the narrative. That realization hit hard. Harder than Harry expected. Harder than Meghan allowed herself to show. And then came the emotional contradiction at the heart of the chapter. Meghan began voicing her thoughts, quietly at first, then with rising intensity. She questioned the timing, questioned the motives, questioned whether this was a calculated move from the palace to elevate Kate at her expense, questioned whether certain people inside the institution were trying to erase the Sussexes from the public royal image piece by piece. Harry, on the other hand, tried to remain calm. He offered possible explanations, logistical, political, procedural. But none of them mattered. Because Meghan saw the situation through one lens. Kate was invited. She was not. And that alone was unacceptable. She felt the shift in public narrative before it even happened. She saw the storylines forming in British tabloids. She saw social media commentary predicting a Kate fashion moment, a Kate highlight reel, a Kate-centered PR boost. She saw the world calling Kate regal, dignified, elegant, adored. She saw commentary praising William and Kate as the pillars of the monarchy, while positioning her and Harry as the unpredictable outsiders. This wasn't just optics. It was identity. And identity is something Meghan guards relentlessly. But here's the twist. Kate had no idea. She wasn't involved. She wasn't strategizing. She wasn't leveraging the ban. She was simply attending an event she had attended multiple times before, fulfilling her role quietly, gracefully, predictably. Kate's involvement was passive. Meghan's reaction was active. And that imbalance made everything feel heavier, more personal, more explosive. Now let's step into Meghan's mind in that moment, because this is where the emotional depth truly kicks in. She realized Kate wouldn't just appear at Royal Variety, she'd dominate it. Every camera would follow her. Every fashion critic would obsess over her dress. Every columnist would frame her as the embodiment of royal stability. Every cultural commentator would highlight her grace and poise. Every international news outlet would push images of her and William smiling, clapping, interacting with performers. And what would Meghan have? Silence, absence, exclusion. But more than that, she would have the painful contrast between what she once represented and what she represents now. Once she was the new, modern royal bride, the glamorous duchess stepping into the spotlight, the woman the world couldn't stop talking about. Now she was the woman deliberately left off a guest list. The emotional shift hit hard. Something fractured, something tightened, something ignited. And that's when Meghan stood up abruptly, a controlled but sudden movement, and said the words that would shape everything that follows. I need to know who pushed for this. Not why, not how, not when. Who? Because Meghan understood that institutions rarely move alone.